This podcast is brought to you by Penji. Penji is a creative subscription service that gives you access to pre-vetted, agency-trained creatives from all over the world. From graphic design to illustrations to social media management and web development, it's all included for one monthly price. It's time to say goodbye to the hassle of searching for top-notch creative talent. With Penji, you get quality and consistency delivered right to your inbox every day. Carefully crafted for you by humans, so meet your new creative team today. Head over to penji.co for more and enter the coupon code located within the podcast show notes.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the Fully Managed podcast. Thank you, Olga, so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you. So today we are going to start with, per usual, a game. This game has specifically you in mind. I like to make them fun for each individual. So I hope that you enjoy this. If you don't tell me. It'll hurt my feelings. But just kidding, you can tell me. But okay, so this game is called Storyboard Shuffle. So I am going to give you 3 terms to like kind of set a scene, and you are going to tell me like what you do with it. It can be kind of any level of the creative process. Like it can be like or you like associate a brand with it and you'd like to make a campaign for that or whatever, but it's kind of like how do you put these 3 things together creatively? Does that sound fun?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yay, yeah, of course. Okay. So, first one. This one's a little weird. Okay. Lighthouse, headphones, lemonade.
I was walking along the shore in my headphones while sipping on a lemonade, and I saw a lighthouse. Very very generic storytelling right here, I guess.
I think you just said the 3 words. You just wanted to touch all the points.
Yeah.
Okay. I think okay. Let me be maybe more specific about so I want you to go through like your creative process with these 3 terms. So if that makes sense. So like if you were to create a campaign for like a brand or something, how would you like associate these 3 things to like, I don't know, like a commercial or an advertisement or something like that? Does that make more sense?
Yeah. So like you want basically to kind of like some sort of like a creative idea combining all these 3 things, or like having all these 3 things.
Yes, correct.
Oh,
it's going to be so much harder. I know. Like you have time to think. Don't worry.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's very interesting. Let's do that. Headphones, lighthouse, and then lemonade. Can it be a campaign for any sort of brand or product?
Any brand. It can be one of those things. It can be whatever you choose.
Okay. Let's do. I have like a very weird thing in my mind, but like.
No, this is a weird game, so please go on.
Okay. Let's do a campaign for. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind, we have like the brand of the cough pills, like not the pills, but like the little like cough candies called the Fisherman. This is where the lighthouse comes in handy. Okay, like let's imagine that the flavor of those like little things, it's a lemonade, new flavor lemonade, and we're gonna launch a campaign that the lighthouse and a fisherman passing by the lighthouse, and the fisherman wearing headphones for some weird reason. I don't know. That feels very weird.
Out. He needs something to do.
Yeah, like he's just like sitting there, like tired of listening to all the nature sounds. So like he clearly needs the headphones in there.
No, I really like that. I don't like, this is kind of just to like get into your creative mind space. Like if you had like weird parameters, what would you do? I think that was fun.
Yeah, it gets weird. Also, under pressure.
I'm so sorry. Everyone watching, just know that in reality, this is not how the creative process works, and that you should give Olga some grace.
Yes, please. Don't credit me on this.
Okay, I'll give you one more. I'm so sorry. Okay. One more. Okay. I'm trying to think of which one would be like more not random. Okay. Taxi, bubblegum, thunder.
Okay. Cool. Let's create a campaign that is in a little bit of a cinematic world. Let's imagine that this is the spot, sort of like somewhere in between the music video and a fashion commercial, and there is that beautiful woman who's like sitting in a taxi chewing the bubble gum, and she's sitting in the back seat because she's like they all these cinematic moments is like the taxi stops on a red light in a big city, and then the thunderstorm. So how about that?
I like that. No, I think that's beautiful. I like the I was also kind of thinking of like a cinematic kind of scene of someone chewing bubblegum in the backseat of a taxi. Maybe it could be like an Uber ad. Maybe it's not an actual taxi, but it's like an Uber. I don't know. Yeah. Uber has some weird commercials, so so I think that makes sense. Well, thank you so much for entertaining me with my silly little game. I hope that it didn't bruise your ego in any way at all. This is not the normal creative process. So it's just a fun little game to get out of your head or maybe get into your head. But thank you so much for participating. For everyone who doesn't know, guys, this is Olga. Please tell us and introduce yourself maybe a bit differently than I would. Like, tell us a little bit about your journey to this point, like what you're doing today, kind of your favorite thing about what you do, and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. I'm currently working at a small agency called Angry Butterfly, and I am an associate creative director on the side of art and design. And how I got to that point, because I've been working as a designer, as an art director, and I really, really loved worlds. So kind of like got myself like very lucky to be in this position, sort of like being a hybrid, which is great. And definitely like my favorite process is all the visual stuff. I'm a very visual person. I love executing campaigns in a visual way as much as it should have like concept, strategy, and everything. But like my part is like more like visualizing it in a cool way. And this is where I get very passionate. And yeah, like I've been working in multiple agencies before, and then at this point I joined the independent agency, which I find like super cool to try as well, because I've never been in that sort of atmosphere. And I really love working with people kind of like in a closer environment where everyone sort of like very agile, like there is the process is kind of like very fluid, and just love working with great people.
Yeah, I think it is really a privilege to be able to work in such a fast-paced environment like a smaller agency is, because you kind of get to learn a lot more about the process than maybe you do in like a very strict position in like a bigger company, or maybe even just a bigger agency. So that is really cool, and I love you commenting on that, because I think it is like a really great opportunity for people to learn in. And sometimes it's the place. Like everyone has a different preference of like what environment they specifically choose to work in, and some people really that dynamic. So it's really great.
Yeah, and I think like both worlds are like definitely worth trying and seeing how different they are, and kind of like find the beauty in those differences.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I kind of want to talk about I guess I shouldn't say the beginning of the career, but earlier on in your life. I mean, you've said that your love for advertising started really young. Do you have something that like an early advertisement or something like that kind of really caught your eye that you still remember from when you were younger? And like, does anything from when you were younger, not even in the professional space yet, like kind of influence how you create?
That's a very good question, actually, because like I guess that would be like partially fair to say for everyone, is like from our childhood, we all sort of like remember those commercials that like really stuck in our brains. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's like weird, but then for some reason it like you cannot get it out of your head. So definitely like that was the case for me when I was like, oh my god, like this is great, this is awesome, this is something memorable. But like obviously like as a child, like I could not appreciate like oh, there is like a creative idea, or like, oh my God, what a great spot, or like, what a great cinematography in there, or something. So it's like, it was more kind of like, it was affecting me in the way that I was like, oh my God, I love this, or like, I could love the jingle in the ad, or like the phrase or something.
Mhm.
But beyond that, even like I remember when I was a child, I always used to say, it's like, oh, I'm going to be a designer, not knowing what the designer does, who that is, like, what do they do? Like, completely like have no clue. For some reason I was just like, yeah, like I will be a designer, and in my mind
Aw.
the designer was someone who is creating the like the interior designer. So I was like, oh, I'm
Okay,
gonna be
okay.
a designer.
Yeah.
Well, I happen to be one. Like completely different from the one that I thought when I was a kid.
Oh.
But I always kind of loved all the creative world and like that sort of environment where you talk to people, you think of some like cool stuff, and you get to work with like super creative and talented people. Like that's something that I started appreciating like later on, like when I started entering the industry. But yeah, when I was a kid, I was always mesmerized by like all the beautiful things that I could see on TV or like out in the world.
Yeah, no, I think that's really wonderful. I think that every creative kind of starts in that, like on an early age of appreciating like artistry in different ways.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't necessarily have to in the way that you ended up doing it, but more like just in general. Like I think that a lot of creatives have like this wonder for the world in like sometimes silly little ways, but like and I think that just kind of like starts maybe your creative process of like why
exactly.
you like things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've also had like a bunch of different creative positions. Do you recommend like a specific place for people to start if they're unsure of like their career path, but they do know that they want to do something creative?
I would say it very much depends. My
Mhm.
story is like I got very lucky, and like definitely that wasn't intentional or anything. It just happened to be in that, and I like again was very grateful for that experience because I started as a production designer, but not in the sense of like on the production team. I started kind of like as a little assistant to the creative teams of art director and the copywriter and the design team that was at that time at the agency. And the agency like that is a big agency with like all the multiple layers, so definitely
Mhm.
like that has a bit more of a concrete structure. However, on my position I kind of like could experience both worlds of a bit more conceptual and like conceptual creative work that I could learn from the art director, and a bit more of a design like visual execution that I could learn from the designers. So like that was a beautiful position for me in terms of like deciding what I want and what I liked.
Mhm.
Yeah, like a little spoiler, like definitely I could not make up my mind at the end, and I'm a hybrid.
Normal.
Like both things worked for some reason, but like at the same time I could see and I could like split the differences in terms of like, okay, like this team does this team is more responsible, like heavy lifting does heavy lifting on this. So and I think in the early stage of my career, that was very important to understand what everyone's specialty is and what's everyone's responsibility is in terms of like the company structure.
Yeah.
Because when entering the advertising agency, like in the industry in general, I had absolutely no idea what is the process, how this all works. I had the advertising education, but I think beyond that, like in practice, it's always like it may vary, it varies from the agency, it varies like from all the different standpoints. But I kind of was lucky in that sense. So I think for someone who's like on the early stages of their career, I think just in general, don't be afraid to try things out, and if it fails, it fails. It's a learning experience. Because I was like honestly very much, I was like, oh my god, like I need to get to the art director position. Like
Yeah.
very at the beginning, as my first position, I was like, I need to be an art director. And then after a few months, applying and like trying to reach out to the agencies, I was like, well, it's clearly not working out. So like maybe I should try something else. And then it couldn't be any better than what my experience was. And like for me, obviously, that I kind of like wasn't that interested in position. So I think it wasn't a failure. It was a learning experience that
Yeah.
was very beneficial for me later on.
Yeah, and I think that that's like kind of serendipitous moment is kind of similar to it across fields, but something that kind of happens to everyone where maybe like you kind of thought that this is the space for you or like this is a certain position that you want and then it doesn't work out or something. Maybe you even get it and then you realize you didn't like it as much as you wanted it, or maybe you didn't get it and then you found something else and you were like, actually I think I like this more than I would have liked that. And I think that happens with a
Exactly.
lot of people.
Yeah.
But would you maybe recommend that people start in a space where they can learn a bunch of different things at once to kind of figure out what they like at like an earlier time, like in maybe a smaller agency environment where they have like they're able to experience different roles or like wear many hats?
I think it's more, honestly, it could be like very, very subjective,
Mhm.
and not to say that this is like whether I'm right or wrong. But I think more importantly to find a place where you have like not caught up on the place where you work, but people who you work with,
Mhm.
just because there are great people everywhere, and there are great people who are willing to pass on their knowledge and sort of like mentor you, which I think mentorship is such an important thing at the early stages of the career, even later on, like even to the point where you reach sort of like higher level. I think
Mhm.
it's still important to kind of like get that different perspective as well. So I think it's more important to find people who you want to work with and who you want to learn from. I think there is like pros and cons in all the different ways, like whether you enter a smaller agency, whether you enter like bigger agency, there will be like good and bad
Yeah.
for your experience either way. um, but I think, yeah, like the most importantly, just to find people who you would be willing to kind of like get the knowledge from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think sometimes if you're earlier on in the workforce and you start in a small agency, there can be things that are like extremely overwhelming about that, like
Exactly.
earlier
Yeah.
on in your career. And that might be like too much for someone. So I think, yeah, it definitely depends on the person. But I think that also that experience can also be somewhat valuable to anyone, even if it might be overwhelming, because at least you have
Yeah.
the opportunity to learn different things. And then, if it's too much, maybe get out, but like
Exactly.
maybe find
Exactly.
something else.
Exactly. And honestly, like considering like I started my career in the big agency, and then my next two agencies that I like went later on were also big networks. So
Mm,
like, and only now, like after 8 years of my experience, I entered the smaller agency, which I can see the beauty of it, like for junior person to start in there.
yeah,
At the same time, I think there are lots of things to learn no matter where you are at. It's more like, again,
yeah,
it's more about the people and the process, and kind of like be a bit more like open-minded and be curious in your position, and like ask questions, try to get your hands on like sort of all sort of stuff. And I think this will go a long way.
yeah. I completely agree. I think that as long as you're, like you said, open-minded and kind of just like looking to learn, then I think you're going to find valuable
Yeah.
information anywhere, unless you're working at like just a horrible place. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I think that there's value to be had anywhere that you learn. And speaking of learning, so you had learned advertising and PR in Russia, correct?
Yes, I was. Yeah, I was.
So when you like pivoted to working in a different country for that, how did that change? Like, was there anything in, um, was there things that translated well for both like that, or were there things that were like notably different that you thought culturally, like maybe you needed to learn when you got to that new position?
That's a good question. When I was studying at home, it was more of a like business side of advertising, I would say. If I would like build my career based on my education back then, I would probably be like an account person or like someone in a strategy.
Mhm.
At the same time, like while studying that, I was like, this is very interesting. I love the industry and everything. Like I love what I'm learning, but I found myself like leaning more towards the creative
Yeah, and it wasn't incorporating
side.
it.
And this is how I was like, okay, maybe I should try myself in a creative. And like, I didn't have like, I did go to art school. And as I said, like from the very beginning, like when I was a kid, I always was sort of like a creative visual person. I've been drawing, painting all my life, like doing all the craft stuff. Always loved that. But I never thought of that from a perspective of my career and applying that professionally. But then later, like while I was studying, I was like, oh, there is also like a creative side of advertising. So maybe I should try that. And this is how I sort of decided to keep going on my education in this field, but take a bit more of a creative perspective. And this is how I moved to Canada. To be honest, I never had work experience back home. So obviously, like it's really hard to judge whether there is like
True.
cultural
So it's hard to
differences or
compare.
not.
Mhm.
But in terms of the education, I would say like theory is theory, and all the marketing knowledge is all very much based on like Western marketing studies and Western practices. So I would say there is like not a lot of differences in there. But in terms of the working experience, unfortunately, there is not something that I can judge.
No, that's really fair, and I appreciate the honesty with that because I think that I'm always curious, especially when I ask similar questions when people are working like internationally, because sometimes there's just like specifically with advertising, like cross culturally, it can be
Yes.
very different, like adjusting for,
Yeah.
and that's something that I have definitely noticed, and I'm always curious about like. And with having learned in a different country, I'm always curious about how different that is, or like how well or ill prepared you felt when going into the workforce in another place.
Yeah, yeah. But at the same time, I feel like it's still like it's a great experience to also get, like to be working across the different markets, especially like drastically different markets. I feel
Mhm.
like that just gives you like a different perspective on things, like the different way of thinking, not something that you get used to. So I think like that's also very beneficial to experience. Not to say that it could be the easy experience, but it's probably lots of fun and it's very beneficial in the long run.
Mhm. No, I completely understand. There's definitely something to be said about can conceptual knowledge of things before actually going into the workforce can be like pretty baseline, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So like it might be pretty similar in different spaces, even cross culturally. So I think that that's something that's to be said. And having not experienced the workforce in Russia
Yeah,
in that way, maybe it's not something that you can
of
compare the
course.
two to.
Yeah, but it's also like to kind of like sort of comment on that. I agree that in terms of like the mentality and the culture that you grow up with, there is lots of things in like even while ideating, sometimes I think about like the cultural things that are very much applicable to the Canadian audience and
Mm.
like to Canadian market. And sometimes I'm like, oh, like I wish I would have that cultural
Mm.
background, so
Mhm.
like I could be a bit more precise in that. At the same time, I wouldn't say that this is a disadvantage. It's more like it's curiosity and how you can twist that. And sometimes you can also give a different perspective, considering that you've been growing up in a totally different culture, and how that can apply to like and kind of like give it just a sort of like a different angle and a different spin to whatever you create. So I think it's all like working in benefit. And but at the same time, yeah, like sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I would be like having a bit more cultural knowledge.
No, I like that insight because I think that there's many strengths about having seen outside of a culture because you kind of have a special perspective on something. Especially, I think that in marketing and advertising, I think people have a very difficult time sometimes getting out of their own head or
Yes.
what they're used to. And so
Yeah.
it's probably really lovely to have your perspective to be able to be like, wait, this is a little different here, or whatever it may be, or like I'm looking at this differently,
Yeah.
because that might be really valuable to them. But it's
Yeah.
also, I can see what you're saying though, also about how, oh, I don't feel as experienced in this sometimes because I'm not
Exactly.
like, and it wasn't raised here. So I'm expecting something differently from this or whatever it may be. And
Yeah.
that might also be a little frustrating at times.
Exactly. Yeah.
So working at Angry Butterfly is as you described, kind of like working differently than previous positions. Like you're more nimble, like you have to be more involved in other spaces maybe. What's maybe a big learning moment that you had in this position that maybe you felt was really valuable to you in like your professional life, that maybe you could take on to like other positions if you ever like moved on in the future, or anything like that that you think would always kind of stick with you?
Yeah, like from my experience at Angry Butterfly specifically, it's hard to say because have been with an agency for 2 months for now, so it's like I'm
No,
still
it's
kind
not
of
too
like
long. How about okay, let me change my question a little bit. So how about just in your professional career, something that you feel like kind of stuck with you that you think you'll always consider for like your work for the future?
I would say it's definitely. Let me think about that because I have like many points. I have
you
like a
can you
list
can
of
bring up
things.
all of them too if you'd like. I mean, if you have a bunch on your mind.
Honestly, like from speaking from successful stories, like some projects like really could be very successful. Some project never see the end of like the end of day, not
Mm.
sorry, the light of day. This
Yeah,
is
yeah, I know what you're saying.
some project never see the
I
light
know.
of day. But I think what's very valuable is how collaboration in a team works, and just sort of like everyone's contribution and passion about that, because I feel like that's very important. And I've been so grateful to be working with amazing people throughout my experience in every single place that I worked at. There are like very, very, very talented people, people who inspire me every single day. So I think that's sort of like the relationship with people. I think that's the paramount of a great environment, the great work, and that's something that makes the work stand out because the process becomes so much easier and like you can collaborate easier, and the relationship can go like even beyond just like a single project. You kind of like work as a team and you value those relationship. I think that's the most important thing. And of course, like the great contribution, like being passionate about the project or the thing that you work on, and trying your best essentially, because I think no matter whether you like it or not, sometimes the project could be like, huh, like not the greatest thing probably, but like I'm still like I just want my work sort of like I have that sort of standard in my own
Yeah,
head, and I
be
want
proud of
that to
it.
be reflected in any work that I do. And I think that makes me almost like proud of myself, that is like, okay, like I did my best in here, and something that helps to kind of like keep going and motivate.
No, I really love that outlook, because it is something, it is kind of hard, especially as a creative. Sometimes you feel stifled sometimes, or like if it's not a brand or a company or a business or whatever that you feel like connected to, it sometimes
Exactly.
can
Yeah.
be really hard to think creatively. But I think that as long as you're trying your hardest, you can still be proud of your work. Maybe it's not your favorite project or your favorite outcome, but at least you can know that you put in your all, which is still like something to be proud of.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, exactly. And I think like along the way while you're doing that, I think it still contributes to your experience. You still learn things, you still kind of like change your perspective on things, and again, like it get helps you to get out of the box and like not only be specifically thinking about one thing or from one angle. So I think that's important.
Yeah, and speaking of that, for creatives that feel stuck or like unsure sometimes for their next step, like what is your advice, or maybe just what you do in general within your own process to kind of get out of that kind of creative block, for lack of better phrase?
I would say that that's a little controversial because my first thing is like, okay, I need to live it for like, I don't know, a day or two, and then just like come back to it with fresh mind. Knowing the business, you almost never have the luxury of time to like, oh, I'm gonna forget
Oh,
and
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
put
come
this
back to that
aside.
next week.
So I understand the controversy.
Yeah, it's like, okay, like we need it now, and we need it like it's kind of like creativity on demand. But I think what helps is like, for me personally, is my own routine, and I know the things that can help me to get in that sort of like a work mode. I'm very much a night worker. Like I do love working at night when it's like I just can sit, all my like my thoughts are in there, my head is down, and I'm just like very, very productive. So I know that about myself, and I can make a benefit out of that. Sometimes I could be like, okay, like there is like clearly no ideas right here, like it's not working, but I know that later in the day I will be able to do that. Or like some sort of like rituals, like I know I would be like, if I have like a clean desk, I will set myself up, I'll pour myself a coffee, and then I will be like, okay, like play on some music, and then I should be good. Like this is a productive moment for me.
Mhm.
So like knowing all those things about yourself, some people like really love going for a walk, and they feel way more productive when they're just like wandering around the neighborhood. I have a friend of mine who's an art director, and he always says that he loves going for a walk and jump on a call with his copywriter, and they just like they
Aw.
just talk, they just like brainstorm and talk, and then they come up with some weird ideas, which are super great. And this is kind of like their work in process. So I feel like it's the most important thing is just like to know all your processes and like how you operate. Know those things about yourself and make them like take advantage of that almost.
No, I really love that. I think that's a really great point to be made. And I think that's a really great point to end on, because it was actually fully succinct and we were a little over time. But no, like I really appreciate you bringing that insight, because I think it is really important for someone to like know themselves to be successful creatively, because there are certain things that you can get advice for from someone else, but maybe it just doesn't work for you. And so like understanding yourself of like what gets you out of a stuck headspace
Yeah.
is really, really vital.
Yeah, exactly. And also like sometimes when I'm stuck with ideas, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna like make that a research. I either go on a website and dig through a whole bunch of information, or just like talk to people about the topic and like get to know their perspective, because you cannot create ideas out of nothing. You need some sort of information to help you generate those. So I think that also very helps as a fundamental thing. Like once you know enough about the subject, you can build on that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like what you said about talking to other people, I think like collaborative efforts are really important too, because sometimes you just need to like have a conversation with someone else to get an idea. Like sometimes you're just thinking too hard that it's just you're making it worse.
Yeah, exactly. I call my dad. I'm like, what do you think about this?
Exactly. No, I mean, like sometimes an outside perspective, as we talked about earlier, is something that's really, really helpful too.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Olga, thank you so much for joining me today. This was an absolute pleasure. I think that this was a really great insight into not only the creative process, but also your experience in your field. And I really appreciated the perspective.
Of course. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was such a pleasure to be talking to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, of course. And thank you everyone for listening. We'd be nothing without you. So I hope that you can check out Olga in the description. And I hope you guys have a lovely day. Thank you so much for listening.
Great.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest. And to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend and, of course, subscribe.